Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate 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 Vasudevaya.
We'll take a look at Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 15, Text 33. Na he antaram bhagavatiha samasta kuksha nahyantaram bhagavatiha samasta kuksha. Atmanam Atmani
Atmani
Nabho
Namo
Nabhasiva
Namaskara
Dhira
Dhira
Atmanamatmani Nabho Nabhasiva Dhira
Atmanamatmani Namo Namaskara Dhira
Pashyanti
Ashanti
Yatra
Yatra
Yuvayo
Yuvayo
Suralingino
Suralingino
Kim
Kim
Pashyanti Yatra Yuvayo Suralingino Kim
Pashyanti Yatra Yuvayo Suralingino Kim
Vyutpaditam
Yuvatam
Hi Udarabhedi
Udaravedi
Bhayam
Bhayam
Yato
Yato
Sya Vyutpaditam Udarabhedi Bhayam Yato Sya
Yutpaditam Udaravedi Bhayam Yatasya
Nahyantaram Bhagavati Hasamasta Kuksha
Nayantaram Bhagavati Samastakusha
Atmanamatmani Nabho Nabhasiva Dhira
Atmanamatmani Namo Namaskara Dhira
Pashyanti Yatra Yuvayo Suralingino Kim
Pashyanti Yatra Yuvayo Suralingino Kim
Vyutpaditam Udarabhedi Bhayam Yatosya
Yutpaditam Udaravedi Bhayam Yatasya
Nahyantaram Bhagavati Hasamasta Kuksha
Nayantaram Bhagavati Samastakusha
Atmanamatmani Nabho Nabhasiva Dhira
Atmanamatmani Namo Namaskara Dhira
Pashyanti Yatra Yuvayo Suralingino Kim
Pashyanti Yatra Yuvayo Suralingino Kim
Vyutpaditam Udarabhedi Bhayam Yatosya
Yutpaditam Udaravedi Bhayam Yatasya
Others please.
Nahi antara bhagavati asamasta kuksha
Nahi Antaram Bhagavati Hasamasta Puksha
Atmanan Atmani Nabho Nabhasiva Krishna Atmanan Atmani Nabho Nabhasiva Gira
Atmanam Atmani Namo Namaskara Dhira
Pasyanti Yatra Yavayo Suralingino Kim
Pashyanti Yatra Yuvayo Suralingino Kim
Yutpaditam Udarabhedi Bhayam Yatasya
Yutpaditam Udaravedi Bhayam Yatasya Nahi Antaram Bhagavati Hasamasta Kuksha
Nahi antara bhagavati asamasta kuksha
Atmanamatmani Navo Navasiva Dhira
Atmanamani Namo Namaskara Dhira
Pashyanti Yatra Yuvayor Suralingino Kim
Pashyanti Yatra Yuvayo Suralingino Kim
Vyutpaditam Hi Udaravedi Bhayam Yatosya
Yutpaditam Udaravedi Bhayam Yatasya
Nayantaram Bhagavati Hasamasta Kuksha
Nahi Antaram Bhagavati Hasamasta Puksha
Atmanamatmani Navo Nabhasiva Dhira
Atmanamatmani
Bhagavatam Udaravedivayam Yatosya
Nahyantaram Bhagavati Hasamasta Kuksha
Nahyantaram Bhagavatam Samasta Kuksha
Atmanam Nabho Nabhasiva Dhiraha
Atmanam Navo Navasiva Dhiraha
Pashyanti Yatra Yuvayo Suralingino Kim
Pashyanti Yatra Yuvayo Suralingino Kim
Vyutpaditam Hyudarabhedi Bhayam Yatosya
Vyutpaditam Udaravedivayam Yatosya
Synonyms. Na,
Na,
not.
na,
He,
he,
because.
because.
Antaram,
Antaram,
distinction.
distinction.
Bhagavati,
Bhagavati,
in the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
in the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Iha,
Iha,
here.
Here,
Samasta Kukshao,
Samasta,
everything is within the abdomen.
everything is within the abdomen.
Atmanam,
Atmanam,
the living entity.
The living entity.
Atmani,
Atmani,
in the super soul.
in the supersoul.
Nabha,
Nabha,
the small quantity of air.
the small quantity of air.
Nabhasi,
Navasi,
within the whole air.
within the whole air.
Iva,
Iva,
as.
as.
Dhira,
Dhiya,
the learned.
the learned.
Pashyanti,
Shanti,
see.
see.
Yatra,
Yatra,
in whom.
in whom.
Yuvayo,
Yuvayo,
you too.
you too.
Suralingino,
Suralingino,
dressed like inhabitants of Vaikuntha.
dressed like inhabitants of Vaikuntha.
Bit of a put down there. You're all dressed up like inhabitants of Vaikuntha. Kim,
Kim,
how?
how,
Vyutpaditam,
Udpaditam,
awakened,
awakened,
developed.
developed.
He,
He,
certainly.
Certainly.
Udarabhedi,
Udaravedhi,
distinction between the body and the soul.
distinction between the body and the soul.
Bhayam,
Bhayam,
fearfulness.
fearfulness.
Yataha,
Yataha,
wherefrom.
wherefrom.
Asya,
Asya,
of the Supreme Lord.
of the Supreme Lord.
Translation. In the Vaikuntha world, there is complete harmony between the residents and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just as there is complete harmony within space between the big and the small skies. Why then is there a seed of fear in this field of harmony? These two persons are dressed like inhabitants of Vaikuntha, but wherefrom can their disharmony come into existence? Responsively, please. In the Vaikuntha world,
In the Vaikuntha world,
there's complete harmony
there is complete harmony
between the residents and the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
between the residents and the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
just as there is complete harmony
Just as there is complete harmony
within the space
within the space
between the big and the small skies.
between the big and the small skies.
Why then is there a seed of fear
Why
then is there a seed of fear
in this field of harmony?
in this field of harmony.
These two persons
These two persons
are dressed like inhabitants of Vaikuntha,
are
are
dressed
dressed
like
like
inhabitants
inhabitants of Vaikuntha.
but wherefrom can their disharmony come into existence?
But wherefrom can their disharmony come into existence?
Srila Prabhupada's purport. Relax, it's a little long. Just as there are different departments in each state in this material world, the civil department and the criminal department, so in God's creation there are two departments of existence. As in the material world, we find that the criminal department is far, far smaller than the civil department, except maybe in the United States. I think we have more people in prison, incarcerated in the United States per capita than any other country in the world. As in the material world, we find that the criminal department is far, far smaller than the civil department. So this material world, which is considered the criminal department, is 1/4 of the entire creation of the Lord. All the living entities who are residents of the material universes are considered to be more or less criminals because they do not wish to abide by the order of the Lord, or they are against the harmonious activities of God's will. The principle of creation is that the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, is by nature joyful, and he becomes many in order to enhance his transcendental joy. He's paraphrasing Vedanta Sutra here, we'll come back to that. The living entities like ourselves, being part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, are meant to satisfy the senses of the Lord. Thus, whenever there is a discrepancy in that harmony, immediately the living entity is entrapped by Maya or illusion. The external energy of the Lord is called the material world, and the kingdom of the internal energy of the Lord is called Vaikuntha, or the kingdom of God. In the Vaikuntha world, there is no disharmony between the Lord and the residents. Therefore, God's creation in the Vaikuntha world is perfect. There's no cause of fear. The entire kingdom of God is such a completely harmonious unit that there's no possibility of enmity. Everything there is absolute. Just as there are many physiological constructions within the body, that they work in one order for the satisfaction of the stomach, and just as in a machine there are hundreds and thousands of parts, yet they run in harmony to fulfill the function of the machine. In the Vaikuntha planets, the Lord is perfect, and the inhabitants also perfectly engage in the service of the Lord. The Mayavadi philosophers, the impersonalists, interpret this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam to mean that the small sky and the big sky are one. But this idea cannot stand. The example of the big sky and the small skies is also applicable within a person's body. The big sky is the body itself, and the intestines and other parts of the body occupy the small sky. Each and every part of the body has individuality, even though occupying a small part of the total body. Similarly, the whole creation is the body of the Supreme Lord, and we created beings, or anything that is created, is but a small part of the body. The parts of the body are never equal to the whole. This is never possible. In Bhagavad Gita it is said that the living entities who are parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord are eternally parts and parcels. According to the Mayavadi philosophers, the living entity in illusion considers himself part and parcel, although he is actually one and the same as the Supreme Whole. This theory is not valid. The oneness of the whole and part is in their quality. The qualitative oneness of the small and large portions of the sky does not imply that the small sky becomes the big sky. There's no cause for the politics of divide and rule in the Vaikuntha planets. There's no fear because of the united interests of the Lord and the residents. Maya means disharmony between the living entities and the Supreme Lord, and Vaikuntha means harmony between them. Actually, all living entities are provided for and maintained by the Lord because he is the supreme living entity. But foolish creatures, although actually under control of the supreme living entity, defy his existence, and that state is called Maya. Sometimes they deny that there is such a being as God. They say everything is void. Sometimes they deny him in a different way. There may be a God, but he has no form. Both these conceptions arise from the rebellious condition of the living entity. As long as the rebellious condition prevails, the material world will continue in disharmony. Harmony or disharmony is realized because of the law and order of a particular place. Religion is the law and order of the Supreme Lord. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find that religion means devotional service or Krishna consciousness. Krishna says, give up all other religious principles and simply become a soul surrendered to me. This is religion. When one is fully conscious that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer and supreme Lord, and one acts accordingly, that is real religion. Anything which goes against this principle is not religion. Krishna therefore says, give up all other religious principles. In the spiritual world, this religious principle of Krishna consciousness is maintained in harmony, and therefore that world is called Vaikuntha. If the same principles can be adopted here, partially, wholly or partially, then it is also Vaikuntha. So it is with any society, such as the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. If the members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, putting faith in Krishna as the center, live in harmony according to the order and principles of the Bhagavad Gita, then they are living in Vaikuntha, not this material world. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurandalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukhaṁ karoti vācalam pangum langhayate girim jakripātamaham vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhobhya Eva Chapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namah Nahyantaram Bhagavati Hasamasta Kukshavatmanam Atmani Navasi Vidhira Pashyanti Yatra Yuriyo Suralingi no Kim Yutpaditam Yudara Vidibhayam Yutosya. In the Vaikuntha world, there is complete harmony between the residents and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just as there is complete harmony within the space between the big and small skies. Why then is there a seed of fear in this field of harmony? These two persons are dressed like inhabitants of Vaikuntha, but where from can their disharmony come into existence? So you can see why I might have been tempted yesterday to do this verse with the other, and I thought, Krishna can do it. Krishna said, no, you can do it. So this is yesterday's class, part D. That's me making fun of my inability to understand French pronunciation, not making fun of French. So here, we still hear these sages, these munis, this Chatursana, four Kumars, expressing their shock, dismay, and indignation. Something going on here. There's a little, although they're Atmaramas, all of a sudden we see them acting like they have some self-interest, but they're dressing it up, right? Oh, they've insulted us. We're great sages, but oh, wait a minute. It's not about us. It's about, this is Vaikuntha atmosphere, and somehow that they created a disturbance in the force. So they're questioning, what's that about? So they're accusing these Vaikuntha-vasis of a fault, and that fault is disharmony, not being one with the Vaikuntha atmosphere. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that their language here is a little different from what others might from the language others might use. You might expect, say, of pure devotees in the Bhagavatam. It's just because they're jnanis. So they're talking about the big sky and the small sky and things like that. So this is the language of the jnanis who, they try, to create this sense of oneness so they can attain liberation. I mean, the oneness is there. We've talked about this since the second canto. Everything is Krishna. This is all Krishna's different energies. Whatever we see, whatever we experience, these are all manifestations of Krishna's different energies. He has three broad categories of energies. Spiritual energy, right? The internal, Antaranga Shakti, Swarupa Shakti. And then the Bahiranga Shakti, the Maya Shakti, the external energy, the Jada Shakti, it's dull, dead matter. And then that weird in-between energy, which is us, the Tatastha Shakti. We live in this sort of, well, the Tata means that part of the river or the shore of the ocean that's sometimes covered by water and sometimes exposed to the air. So that's where we are. And so we're very strongly influenced by our environment. We can go one way or the other. We can act like Antaranga Shakti, or we can act like Bahiranga Shakti, depending on our association, essentially. So there's a little kind of law and order, what linguist and cognitive scientist George Lakoff would call strict father language here in this purport. But the idea is that the material creation, the Antaranga Shakti, is a situation fit for those who can't live in harmony with Krishna's desire. Prabhupada says they don't wish to abide by the order of the Lord, but then he says, and I highlighted this because I really like it, or they are against the harmonious activities of God's will. So we saw yesterday we saw how this broad vision Srila Prabhupada brings to presenting Srimad Bhagavatam. We saw that in his introduction, his preface, those first couple of paragraphs of his preface, where the trend in human society is toward the oneness of all human beings, and we see that sometimes. We see that expressed in certain ways in popular culture nowadays, in political culture even, intellectual culture, academic culture. We see that kind of tendency where we are one. We are, and we talked about it yesterday. We are one family. A verse from the Vedas that said, that seeing this person as my friend and this person as not my friend, that's small-mindedness. But broad-mindedness means seeing that we are all one family. As Srila Prabhupada wrote to me about the Society of Devotees, we are all one family. So this is the broad vision that the Kumaras, these four sages, perceive as apparently missing in these two gatekeepers of Vaikuntha. So therefore they're acting about, there's us and them. And as I pointed out yesterday, us and them, that's the seed, that's the seed in the Mahabharata, this whole idea of us and them, held onto until just as the battle is about to begin. After so much, after Dhritarashtra has heard and even seen so much, seen that we see in the Mahabharata that Krishna called an assembly and he made this one last-ditch effort to avoid the war. And he, gave Duryodhana an out, a face-saving way to avoid the war. Look, they're Kshatriyas. Their business is they make their living by managing and taxing. So give them each a village to run. And what was Duryodhana's reply?
Not a pinhead of land.
Not as much, I won't give them as much land as you could drive a pin in. So that, a little intransigent, a little dug in his position. And so Krishna said, okay, try this. And he displayed his universal form, giving even Dhritarashtra the vision to see the universal form, which really freaked Dhritarashtra out. But still, he wouldn't yield. And so we see, even in the first verse of the Bhagavad Gita, just right at the verge of the battle, Dhritarashtra asks Sanjaya, Mama kapandavaschaiva kimakurvata. What are us and them about to do? What are my boys and his boys about to do? These are first cousins. You almost don't get closer family. Like in Hawaii, everybody's cousins, right? Everybody's cousin. But even among Hawaiian folks, there's actual cousins,
Yes.
right? And that's really close. Everybody's auntie and uncle, but we also had actual aunties and uncles. Not everybody's auntie. The geezers are auntie and uncle. So this is such a close relationship, as I've pointed out so many times. They are one family. But because Dhritarashtra wouldn't let go, under the influence of Duryodhana mostly, wouldn't let go, because he had this sense, that's not right, but he was so much under Duryodhana's sway that he just couldn't give this idea up, us and them. So therefore, this is kind of like the last straw reason why, whatever it is, 640 million or 64 million, wherever you, depending on where you read, in other words, a whole lot of people, men, had to die in 2.5 weeks. There is also the little Draupadi factor. Because I like to point this out, and I do this very self-consciously as a sannyasi, because one woman was disrespected. 640 million men had to die.
How many?
640 million, we read,
640 million.
in 2.5 weeks. Imagine a mess.
Was
Every
disrespected.
day, somebody, you had to have somebody go and like haul all these bodies, and elephant bodies, and horse bodies, and broken chariots off the battlefield. While all the generals and everybody sitting around, telling war stories during the evening. So it's this is what they're pointing out. And Srila Prabhupada says just after that, he says, the principle of creation is that the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, is by nature joyful, and he becomes many in order to enhance his transcendental joy. So this is paraphrasing one of the sutras in the Vedanta Sutra, Lokavatu Lila Kayavalyam. And so the sutra is there dealing with the idea that God doesn't have senses, and God doesn't have...
Jai Shri Bhakti.
If God doesn't have senses, and God doesn't have any goals to attain, and the word that's used there is prayojana, he doesn't have any goals to attain, he doesn't have a real agenda, how can he be responsible for the creation of the world? And the Vedanta Sutra answers this. Lokavatu lila kaya. It's a lila. The one becomes many simply out of joy. And Baladev Vidyabhushana in his Govinda Bhashya explains, just as somebody who's feeling overwhelmed by joy dances with nothing in mind to attain. He's just cutting loose. So the Lord kind of cuts loose and says, let me enjoy with others. Yeah, I'm one, yeah, I'm everything, but it's more fun with your friends. Right? So Lokavatu Lila Kayavani. So he becomes many in order to enhance his transcendental joy. It's just a lila. There's no real reason for it. There's no real goal to attain. And then we see this phrase that I point out sometimes, part and parcel. In conventional use, part and parcel is more of an adjective kind of phrase. We say something is part and parcel with something. It means it's kind of like the same sort. And Srila Prabhupada uses it as a noun phrase, pointing, and so that's we're the anshas, we're the separated anshas or parts kind of the Supreme Lord. So we should have that same nature, and so there should be a natural inherent harmony with the Lord's desires. And but what we see here is that these two gatekeepers, Jaya and Vijaya, apparently have some other idea. Now, if you remember from the other day, this is a Leela too. This is all been arranged by the Lord. Jaya and Vijaya, they don't really have this us and them mentality. But it appeared in them so there could be an occasion for them to be cursed by these sages. So they could make a choice, not really a choice for Jaya and Vijaya, because they, being one with the Lord, they knew what he wanted. So he gave them a choice, nominal choice. 7 births as devotees, 3 births as demons. And they said, oh, well, we'll take 3 births as demons, sounds quicker. But the real reason was they sensed, they understood, they felt the Lord's heart. I need somebody to tussle with. And I pick you. And they said, cool. So this is all a setup. Because here we know that we're getting we've just seen Hiranyaksha's birth in previous chapters, Diti's impetuousness and the apparently inauspicious births that came from that impetuous behavior, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. And now we're being set up for Hiranyaksha's encounter with Lord Varaha, which we heard about previously in brief. And now we're going to get a little fuller, of one of the accounts. We have at least 2 accounts of Varaha's appearance. So then this big sky and little sky thing. Oh gosh, the clock, my friend. We have the big sky, and well, that's the part and parcel thing. That there seems to be some separation between the sky. I think the example that the Mayavadins use is the sky within the pot, and then the greater sky. And they say that if you break the pot, then the sky in the pot merges with the big sky, or something like that. But this is. This misconception is dismantled here in Srila Prabhupada's purport. He just says it simply doesn't make sense. Just like we've been reading on Sunday evenings, been reading from chapter 7 of Adi Leela of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya in 5 features, which is mostly, there's glorification of the Panchatattva, but largely the chapter consists of the first account of Lord Chaitanya's meeting with Prakashananda Saraswati and the Mayavadi sannyasis of Varanasi. And Lord Chaitanya is simply pointing out how the philosophy, in the actual context, the real understanding of the Vedic literatures, the idea that's given in Shankara's Sharira Kapashya doesn't make any sense. There is an internal logic to it, and therefore we're warned against reading it, because even a Mahabhagavata could be infected by it, because there is this internal logic. It seems to make sense within itself. But in a broader sense, if you understand, for example, the Purusha Sukta, which is where we find the original expression of the idea of Achintya Bheda Tattva. That everything here, everything everywhere is Krishna. It's none different from Krishna. But at the same time, he's aloof and removed from everything. So this simultaneous oneness and difference. That's not some new idea that Jiva Goswami came up with. That's not some novel idea introduced by Lord Chaitanya. And it's not a novel idea introduced in the 2nd canto of the Bhagavatam. It goes all the way back to the oldest of scriptures, the Rig Veda, which is where we find the Purusha Sukta hymns. So in that, if we actually understand what the Shastras teach, then we can see that this just doesn't make any sense. So then, Srila Prabhupada comes in his purport. He talks about dharma, different senses of dharma, and I talk about this a lot. Sarva dharman parityajya, dharma prochita kaitavatra, giving up all conventional senses of dharma, completely rejecting them. Parityaja in Bhagavad Gita, prauchita in the Bhagavatam. Parityaja, an imperative, an instruction in the Gita, and prochita in the Bhagavatam, past something or other. I think it sounds like past perfect. Having given up. Now we've got a literature for those people who have already completely rejected all other kinds of religion. And because there is no self-interest, this is something that they'll be able to appreciate. And other people can be benefited by it too, even people who aren't completely free from all kinds of self-interest. So we've got a big audience here on the bank of the river, right? It's not just a bunch of Hare Krishna devotees. It's all different kinds of sages and all kinds of elevated personalities from all over the universe with different ideas, which is why at the end of the Rasa dance, King Pariksit asks this question, wait a minute, how does this happen? Krishna's like the embodiment of Dharma, but he's acting adharmically in the middle of the night. And so Shukadev responds that here's what you need to understand. These pastimes of Vishnu are so purifying that they uproot, that if heard faithfully, if heard with the right attitude, in the right company, they will uproot the hridroga, the heart disease that afflicts us all, which is selfishness. So Srila Prabhupada brings it right to us here. He says, give up all these different ideas of religion. Real religion, real dharma means just surrendering to Krishna, taking shelter of Krishna. And if we all do that, then there's a harmonious situation. And so then twice in the last two sentences, he talks about how this applies to his International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So I thought I would once more share the 7 purposes for which Srila Prabhupada says he created the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. To systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large and to educate all people in the techniques of spiritual life, in order to check the imbalance of values in life and to achieve real unity and peace in the world. To propagate a consciousness of Krishna, God, as it is revealed in the great scriptures of India, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. To bring the members of the society together with each other and nearer to Krishna, the prime entity, thus developing the idea within the members and humanity at large that each soul is part and parcel of the quality of Godhead, Krishna. To teach and encourage the Sankirtan movement, congregational chanting of the holy name of God as revealed in the teachings of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. To erect for the members and for society at large a holy place of transcendental pastimes dedicated to the personality of Krishna. To bring the members closer together for the purpose of teaching a simpler, more natural way of life, and with a view towards achieving the aforementioned purposes, to publish and distribute periodicals, magazines, books, and other writings. Now there's one other place where, and I mentioned this yesterday as well, but I thought we would go right there and hear it directly from Srila Prabhupada. In the fourth text of Upadeshamrita, Tatati pratigurnati guhyamakyati prachati bhukte bhojayate chaiva sadvidham pratipriti lakshana. 6 ways in which devotees express their mutual love. Priti. Priti means love or affection. So offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence, inquiring confidentially, accepting prasad, and offering prasad are the 6 symptoms of love shared by one devotee and another. So, offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, we need to take a quick look at the word charity. Charity comes from a Latin word that means affection. The kind of affection that we should feel for each other, that everyone should feel for each other. Or even a more personal affection. So when there are gifts exchanged, when someone offers a gift out of affection, naturally the recipient receives it in the mood in which it's offered. And the same thing with confidences, and the same thing with feeding. Someone offers some prasad, the recipient is very happy to receive that prasad because it's a token. Well, first of all, we're talking about prasad, but it's a token of that other devotee's affection. And in his purport to this verse, Srila Prabhupada writes, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness has been established to facilitate these 6 kinds of loving exchanges between devotees. Just as he says in the 3rd or 4th of the 7 purposes, to bring the devotees closer together and nearer to Krishna, right, the primeval entity. So, if we live and work together with an eye to fulfilling these 7 purposes, then we can create a Vaikuntha atmosphere. Here, even us. Look, we're a very interesting collection of people. But as we work together, this place kind of keeps its Vaikuntha atmosphere. When I was mowing the lawn the other day, I think I was in the middle of, I was just starting to mow again or something. I was putting the batteries, having recharged the batteries, putting them back in the mower. And there were these 2 older women who had come to do, I guess, to get something in the gift shop. And as they were leaving, one of them approached me, saw me with my hat and my gloves and batteries, heading over to the mower. And said, "Oh, are you the gardener?" And I said, "Well, I'm one of them." And she said, "Well, it looks so nice. I've been here sometimes when the weeds are just out of control, but you're doing a very good job." So when people come, as long as we're able to work together, keep the temple clean. Keep this Vaikuntha atmosphere. Keep the temple clean. Keep everything in order. Keep squabbling to the bare minimum. It happens. Just as I was saying yesterday, if you've got 2 bangles on, if the lady moves her arm, they're going to clank. Or, ring, because they should be made out of something nice. So there's going to be that, but we keep it, we try to understand what the other devotees need to stay inspired, and we try to behave in a way that fosters that. I have to remind myself sometimes that I don't have any other business than becoming Krishna conscious and trying to behave in a way that will inspire the devotees around me to become Krishna conscious. And when I veer off that, then it's a drag. It's a drag. It's a drag for the people around me, and at least as big a drag for me, because I know it. So we all have our moments. So what do we do when we fall down? Who's our friend when we're falling? The ground, the floor, because that helps us get back up. So anyway, we want to try to do our best to create this Vaikuntha atmosphere, so that when people come, they'll experience it to some extent or another. If they taste the prasadam, they hear the kirtan, they see the devotees interacting lovingly with one another, see how beautiful and clean and nicely decorated the temple and the altar are, how nicely kept the grounds are, then people can't help but be attracted. Can't help but be attracted to the Vaikuntha atmosphere of New Navadvipa. I'm sorry, I will make a little space for any quick questions. Oh, thank you. Grantaraja Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.
When Rupa Goswami says the ground, it helps us get up after